get you guys anything before we start?
Yeah, we're good.
But, you know, your name back.
Yeah, they had so many different. I think it's a good name, and I do think that the properties that they ascribe to it, and, the flow,
Right, yeah.
water.
See, that's the market, yeah.
But
Because I was trying to give her a minute to see if she's going to come, but she's in trouble.
I just
Recruiting people.
I did
I know your style.
program for a client, an internal campaign, a slogan, and kind of a little brand or whatever. I'm just thinking, this is, I'm just thinking people can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that took me 15 minutes to sort of say, this will probably work. And it's always so difficult to figure out how to charge.
I love how I always say, oh, you only have 3 days to decide. Thank you.
Yeah, they coming back in?
Yeah. I was
Beat last time.
Three people.
So I guess this last one, these are not working.
I did see that. That was a long time ago.
Oh, I see your shadow. Hi, welcome.
You can sit anywhere and have some lemonade, cookies, all that.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and start this evening. Thank you for joining us, especially people that are my friends have grabbed out of the hallway. So we're glad that you joined us. What you're all here gathered to join us for this evening is most of us belong to the Master's of Arts in Integrated Global Communications program here at Kennesaw. And one of our assignments is to put together a series of events that brings in professionals, esteemed professionals, from different disciplines to talk about marketing communications opportunities. So you guys are actually here for what I think is the best of our programming, because tonight we're going to focus on international opportunities and expatriate activities. So welcome. I want to tell you just a little bit about our guests who have been very generous with their time and battling of traffic to get here. And then my friend and colleague Inger is going to take over and talk about some of the questions and launch us into some of the questions we're going to talk about this evening. At the far end, please welcome Adrienne Ware, who's a very, as her resume says, well-seasoned IT professional. But what impresses me is that for more than 20 years, she has a series of executive leadership positions where she's been recognized both domestically and internationally for her work. And she's been involved in both sales and service delivery and offer creation. I'm not sure what offer creation is. Maybe you'll tell us about that.
And I'll talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm.
Good, okay. She has a who's who list of different awards, and we are very honored to have her here this evening to be able to talk about some of her experiences that are currently with Hewlett-Packard and previously with AT&T and Avaya. So some real diversity in her background to shed some light on what she's here to talk about. In the middle, we have Scott Jacobson, who I have known forever. And what I do know about Scott, well, I don't know if that deserves a hand. But what I do know about Scott is he is downright masterful marketing communicator, and he has, again, much like Adrienne, a long list of clients that he's worked with. I know him from Ketchum Public Relations and the Coca-Cola Company, and then he went over to London, and he stayed. He stayed and stayed for 7 years? 8 and a half, okay. And when he was there, what fascinated me is not only did he work with American companies, but then he transferred to international companies, not domestically based companies. But his resume also includes big names. I've mentioned Coke and Ketchum. He also works with Cox Enterprises and Equifax. In London, he worked with Orange, which is kind of like a Verizon kind of organization, and Cellular Wireless, which is now AT&T here. Scott has worked in New York in PR as well as here in Atlanta. So Scott, thank you for making the journey north to Kennesaw. And Yemily, Pastor John is another wonderful speaker tonight. What impressed me when I was looking at her resume is that she's a journalist from Venezuela, but she's like the perfect storm. TV, radio, newspaper, magazine, award winner, an artist herself. So the list of accolades and experiences goes on. And you've been here for 3 years now with CNN Espanol?
CNN, 3 years, yeah. But
Right.
in Atlanta, 10 years.
Well, we are very honored that you were able to join us. And again, I'm not bragging about tonight, but I do think you came for the right program because our guests really show some really interesting experiences. And Ingrid's going to prompt them with questions, and then we will also have an opportunity for you to do so as well. So thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Again, thank you again for being here this evening. We definitely appreciate it. As we get started, let me just set some ground rules. This is more of a discussion, and I'm just going to moderate the discussion. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll point you out and just say who the question is for. Okay? Any questions? You guys ready to get started? Okay. For the first question is to go to Adrienne. How did you prepare for your overseas assignment, and what do you wish you'd done?
Yeah, so actually, I've never been an expat overseas, which is to live overseas, but I travel overseas quite frequently. So in fact, this year, I've been to 11 different countries this year alone. And in preparation, what I'll say is one size does not fit all, and so don't assume that the American or US culture fits in another culture. And so in preparation for my visits, because I'll visit a number of customers, I also have people around the world that work as a part of my team. And so some of the customs that we have here, so for example, as people get to know me, I'm very touchy-feely, so I'll hug, right? So the next time I see these guys, I'll probably hug Scott or something like that. And so in other countries, that's not appropriate. So I try to be mindful of what the cultures are, what the different types of food and fare are, so that I can learn each time that I go to interact with customers. And I also, in preparation for me being there, I try to get there a day or two before, just to kind of get a feel of the landscape of the people and what they do every day and how they fit in, and so that I'm not, stand out or whatever as it relates to the customers.
Thank you. Scott?
Well, the first time I worked abroad was when I was working for Coca-Cola, and I had to go on very short notice, so I didn't really, there was a shortage in the London office for Coke, and someone in Atlanta, a very senior communications person, had a slide in a PowerPoint at a global communications conference that said, we're going to do more sending people around to the different offices. And in London, there was a vacancy and they were having trouble filling it locally. And they said, let's call Randy and see if he was really serious about that. I mean, he just put, people put things up in slides so that it sounds good in the presentation. I don't think he meant to never do it, but it wasn't something he was in a hurry to make happen. And they called him on it. And so he said, well, I can't now say I wasn't serious. I've got to send somebody. And so he asked around his direct reports, and my boss raised her hand and said, I'll send Scott. So I didn't really, and I thought, well, yeah, so she asked me.
Dr. Polly House?
Yes, yes, that was. It was Polly House, who's now Dr. Polly House, who teaches here. And to this day, I thank Polly, because had she not just sort of raised her hand, because she wanted to look good to her boss, and come through. So and the thing is, you'd think, okay, well, it's England and it's English speaking, and I think on that trip I was in and out so quickly. I was there for 4 months. I was probably oblivious to any differences. When I went back to London, that was 1997, and then I went back in 2005, which again happened very quickly. But at that time, I was a little bit more similar to what Adrienne said. You know how, I'll just give an example of cultural differences. I started to notice little things that I hadn't noticed before, and part of that was because I hadn't really taken the time to. I was so excited about going, and really kind of both times it happened really fast. But one example, you know how as Americans, if you go into people's offices at companies, we like to personalize our space and sort of make it our own, and we bring pictures of our families, and if we work on a project, we save something from the project, or people will give you something, you put it on your desk, you put pictures on the wall if you have an office. It's very different. I mean, there are countries, so in Amsterdam, I went somewhere once, and I actually asked because the space was so empty, and they said, it's really taboo. It's a communal, even if you have your own office, it's a communal environment, and it's frowned upon to personalize it too much. And the same thing in London, actually. I had less space, because that's another thing too, is we tend to be more generous in this country with the amount of space we give people than experiences that I've had abroad. But I selected from my collection of photos and things, and you get to a certain point, and you've accumulated a lot of stuff that you've had in your workspace. So I just brought a couple of things in, and after a couple of weeks, I felt uncomfortable, and I took it away, because I was literally the only person who kind of who had staked out this space and made it, I brought a few little things. I might have still had one or two things there, but yeah, that was, so yeah, I guess that, it was fine, but that's, if you don't sort of call ahead, ask ahead. Now when I travel to different countries, I try to remember from that, and I usually want to know what's the tipping policies in restaurant, just things like that, or like Adrian was saying, it just got me to realize that, you can feel things out, but it does help to phone ahead, or nowadays you can Google everything and just get a little bit of a sense of what the culture's like.
What to expect.
Well, when I came here to the United States 10 years ago, basically I was looking around to see what I was going to do in my field, which is communications. So I started working in a radio station, a Hispanic radio station, and it was a tough experience because it was kind of, they said to me, well, we like your work, but we don't have the budget to work with this. So then I went to another radio station, and it happens again. So then I keep thinking, why I don't deliver the news by myself, and I create a company, which the main thing was to deliver news for the immigrants here in the United States. And it works really good. I co-found that company with another person, but it was very challenged because I realized that we all immigrants think, or used to think, that we are like the same, but our culture in Latin America and Central America, Mexico, is totally different. We speak the same language, but we don't have the same things in common. We have so many things, beautiful things in common, but we are totally different. So when I was going to deliver the news, the first thing that I realized is that we speak Spanish, but we don't speak the same words. Words are different. So how we can deliver or broadcast a newscast that is good for all of us, immigrants. So that was tough, but it was really nice, because we find, I think, the appropriate language to do it. And we're still doing it, actually. We still have that company. It's not CNN, the name is Hispanic News Service, and we deliver news for Southeast immigrants. And it's a very nice experience because you can get with radio, not with the TV, the instant reaction of the people. And you can see what they feel, what they like, what they don't like. And it's very nice because you can interact by phone, you can, talk with them. So I think for me at the beginning when I was here, I was saying, well, it's gonna be really challenged, but then it turns to be a very nice experience because it's more that you get back that you can give. It's something really, really nice.
What was one of the most shocking things you learned? You talked about the different languages and that sort of thing, but what was one of the most shocking things that you learned from that?
You know what? When we came here, we have an image that when we came from Latin America, I'm talking about Latin America, we have an image that we all are going through the same issues, but it's not like that. So I think we have to divide in our mind what is to be an immigrant without papers and an immigrant with papers. Is totally different. And mostly the people that we were trying to reach were immigrants without papers. And that's a lot of suffering, that's a lot of things, tough things that are going on. And there's so many bad news surrounding them that we just try to deliver to them something good. So like, how can we talk about your culture? How we can, not the bad thing that guy killed the other guy, you know, because that's always how it looks. And we try to say we're good people and we're here for something, no matter if you have papers and you don't have papers. And we focus on that in our music. So it was challenged, you know, because people sometimes are, or mostly all the time, immigrants without the papers. They're afraid. So I think that was something really tough.
And Scott, what about one of the shocking things that you encountered?
I was surprised in the degree to which cultural differences, because I worked in London for a company at Orange that started as a UK company and was acquired by France Telecom, so it's a French company, obviously. And so, you know, the bosses were in France, and the dynamic between English people and French people, it was remarkable to me that cultural history between the two countries impacted the relationships that French people and English people had in a business environment. That came into play. And especially when you had English people working for a company that was very iconic for a while in the UK, the Orange brand, but being owned by French people. The fact that dynamic of the cultures and the histories, you know, centuries old history that still exists, never mind class things within Britain alone, we can get into that later, but that was really, you know, the fact that was something you had to consider as an American who, I'm aware a little bit of the history between France and England, but the fact that it would come into play in relationships of relatively young people in the 21st century workplace was quite a shock.
How to navigate that.
Yeah.
I'll ditto that. And so I still see that today. So I have, like I said, a global team, and in Europe is where I see that most. And so even on conference calls or in meetings, I will see them actually debate, and they'll say, oh, the French guys, and the reason why they agreed that this was the right recommendation was for some reason. And the Brits, you know, and so just to see that dynamic and never having been introduced to that before, and this is on a business problem. So it's a business problem that we're trying to resolve, but just how different culturally, you know, they thought about it, and they're debating amongst themselves from that perspective.
And anyone can answer this next question. Tell us about an ethical dilemma that you faced in dealing with a global community, and what was the situation, what was the task or action that you took, and what was the end result?
I can start with that one. I had an interesting one. So a couple of years ago, I used to have public sector for Hewlett-Packard. And as a public sector employee, and you guys see this and know this all day long, you're not supposed to take gifts, etc. And so I was in Germany meeting with NATO, and as a part of it, and so that was the day that Muammar Gaddafi was killed. And so if you could imagine being in that environment, it was just a lot of stuff going on. And so back to even Scott's comment, there were debates about who supported killing Gaddafi that day and who didn't. and the different countries, right? Because NATO is bringing together of all the different countries. And so just being involved in that dynamic. But fast forward, there was and this was already pre-planned, there was an event that evening, and only a select few, so it was about 100 or so people were invited to this event. So I was invited to the event, and the head of NATO at the meeting actually asked that I sit at the main table. And so having supported public sector, you're not supposed to accept gifts of a certain value, etc. So of course, this dinner was at this beautiful castle. Like, so if you just closed your eyes and envisioned a castle that you saw on TV, like with the cobblestone pathway leading up and these stone stairs, and it was gorgeous. And so I felt almost like Cinderella, right? And so the fact that I was invited to sit at the head table. And so they were bringing these gifts to the special guest. And you're at the head table, how do you not accept that gift? And so, you know, of course, I'm, you know, kind of thinking through like, oh my God, what do I do? And so, and of course, I wanted the gift too. I did want the gift. And so, right, exactly. And so, so as time progressed and the dinner went on, etc., and it was time for me to leave, I conveniently left the gift. I forgot the gift and left. But it was, you know, it was an awkward scenario given that that was a part of the dinner and the meeting, and it's almost like ungracious, like if we were invited to your house and didn't eat your meal, how would you take that? So it was an awkward predicament for me, but yeah.
The last organization that I worked for in the UK was a charity, and it was it's a British charity, and it was a Christian order of chivalry that went back to literally medieval times. It had been, I can't think of all the technical stuff, but it had been discredited during Henry VIII because he took everything away from Christian organizations, but then, I can't remember, it was Queen Victoria or somebody then reinstated. I mean, this was all this history around this British organization, Christian Order of Chivalry, and it had all these people who were volunteers for this charity, but because it was this order of chivalry, it was really very focused on the volunteers and giving them awards. And over time, though, charities, you know, it's the 21st century now, and charities have to be less now about rewarding the volunteers and people within the organization and more about charitable output and giving to society and the community. But this organization was pretty stuck. You know, there literally generations and generations of people, you know, their grandparents had volunteered and now they volunteered. And there was a certain expectation of what the experience as a volunteer. I'm not saying these people gave their time and they did give to the community, but the costs within the organization of supporting the infrastructure and the volunteer network were significant. And I was responsible for not only marketing the brand, but fundraising as well. And so it was to me an ethical issue that, you know, we're putting out there what the cause of the charity is, but yet it took a tremendous amount of resources just to run the organization. This was a volunteer organization that probably would have been more cost effective if it had paid staff. That's how costly the volunteer infrastructure was. And so I struggled with that. I mean, there was some change going on. That was part of the reason I took the job, because the board of directors and the chief executive was, for a variety of reasons, they were trying to bring about change, but it was, for me, it was too slow and not, you know, that's part of being in any corporate job, or, you know, you guys will, if you're in almost any organization, and it's the same in charities and corporate, things do move very slow. You know, if you're the kind of person who doesn't have a lot of time for bureaucracy and wants things to happen quickly, you can get very frustrated very quickly. But this was something where I just felt my job is to get people to give money to this organization. So if this doesn't happen faster, every day that goes on is an ethical dilemma for me. And ultimately, it was a big part of the reason after a little over 4 years, I ended up leaving the job, because that just it wasn't happening fast enough, and I found it very frustrating. I mean, I think while I was there, I had as much impact as I could to try to bring it more out into the open and get it to change more quickly. So that was kind of my way of coping with it, but my other way of coping with it was also that at a point it contributed to just my desire to leave.
Okay, I think as a copy editor in CNN, we deal every day with ethical issues. And it's because we deliver the news to Latin American, Central American, and Mexico, okay? And then the justice in those countries is different. So sometimes we receive news about, let's say, a president that is involved in corruption. And then somebody wrote something that we have to review, and when we see it, we said, who said that? Who said that he stole $1,000? Well, they said in the street that no. Nobody can say in the street. Who said that? So we send that back. So every day is an issue about what are we going to say and how we're going to say it, and where is the real source of that news. It happens kind of a week ago that we have ex-president of Panama. His name is Ricardo Martinelli, and we were thinking that he was formally accused of some corruption in his country. And when we had him sitting there, he said, you know what? I just have accusations. Nobody filed anything. So we were like, oh my God, what is this? So, you know, we have to be aware of what's going on in that situation, because it's not just for us, it's the name, it's CNN that is involved. So we have to verify everything. This morning I was working and a guy told me, oh, you know what, can you review this for me? Can you check it out? So I'm gonna record that and put it on the air. And he said the names of the 5 candidates of FIFA, the football thingy. And then he was saying there, well, this candidate, he used to be like this, and nobody likes him. And I say, who said that nobody likes him? Well, I don't know, I read it, I don't know, I was searching in Google. No, you can't do that. You know, so that's the thing that we have to be aware, because, you know, it's terrible if something goes to air like that. So it's very delicate. It's you know, it's every day.
And I can imagine you're carrying not only your name, but the names of your organizations on
Yes.
your backs too, with that particular issue. Any questions so far? Anybody can answer in any order. What advice would you recommend for those of us who want to become an expat or work overseas, that sort of thing, and hopefully come back? What advice would you recommend for us?
I would recommend to look first at the laws, to do the work in that country, to learn the language, which for me is kind of tricky, because I always speak Spanish. I always speak Spanish with all my coworkers in home, and whatever place I am, I speak Spanish, and I use Spanish as my profession. So, but I think that's kind of the first thing to do. When I came here, I was thinking that it was like, oh well, I need just a work permit, and that's it. And it's not, it's a whole process that it takes time, you know, when you go overseas to actually, journalism, you can do it wherever you go, but you need some requirements to do it good.
So I'll say, you know, learn the culture. Be very open-minded, because like I said, one size certainly doesn't fit all. We have our, I'll call them US-isms, right? And so this is how we believe things should be. But when you go to other countries, just be open-minded. You'll be amazed at how much you'll learn. Learn to listen, and then also learn the language. And one of the things that I've learned is it doesn't matter how loud I speak or how slow I speak, does not make someone from another country understand me. So in the beginning, I would say, I said, and so it's like they're standing there like, I still don't understand what you said or meant. So to learn the language, learn the culture, etc., and really engage, immerse yourself. So get out of the hotel and the touristy areas and really go learn and immerse yourself in the culture. Like I said, almost everywhere I've been, I have just been amazed at the people that I've found and come across. And in a lot of cases, now I'm brave enough to kind of do it by myself. So even my kids are like, so is someone waiting for you when you get to the airport? And the answer is no. And so, but I figure it out, right? I figure it out. I figure out how to get from A to B. I figure out, what parts of town to go to, what parts not to go to, how to catch local transportation. So, and how to drive. So I was in Brazil. That's probably the last time I'll drive in Brazil, but I drove in Brazil, and so just get out and really, enjoy and take advantage of the culture. I think you learn so much during that process.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to that is if you have time, if you know or you think you want to work abroad, and try to pick a couple of countries that you're interested in. It does help if you've already been studying the language, and so that gives you an opportunity. I cheated because I went to an English-speaking country, which takes a lot of the challenge away. But I so admire people who studied languages and then went and spent time in those countries to really perfect the language, because English is the international business language, but I always felt a little bit awkward if I was the one English-speaking person in a meeting of French people and they were all speaking English for my benefit. First of all, they have side conversations, and French is the only other language besides English that I speak a little bit of, but I speak enough of it to get by as a tourist in a French-speaking country, not in a business meeting. So yeah, I would say if you have time at this stage of your lives and career or pre-career, whatever it is, take the time, even if it means your career starts a little bit later, if you can afford it, or even if you have to do it on a strict budget, and go and spend, if there's one country you want to work in, try to spend a summer there or study there for a semester. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff, and I think that's a great way to do it. The other thing is to do it the way I did it, which is to work for an American company that's an international company and make it known that you have an interest in having an international assignment, because certainly from visas and work permits and things like that, it's especially hard for people outside this country to come here. It's actually easier. It's getting harder now because a lot of countries are picking up this sort of anti-immigrant, it's a threat to our workers. There's a lot of that in Europe now. So it's gotten, I think the work permits that I got in the UK are harder to get now than just 10 years ago when I got one. But that's a good way to do it, is get with a company and just make it known, or an agency or whatever it is, and just make it known that you're interested in an international assignment. It's a much easier, and then there might be something permanent that comes up if you want to stay.
And I'll just piggyback on one thing that Scott said, which was every year I try to do summer interns, and so I have my summer interns in different places. So this year I just had them all go to Houston, and none of them ever lived in Houston. But one year I had them do Costa Rica, and it's funny because the interns will say, so do you pay for housing, or do you find a house for me? And the answer is no. And so it's like, oh my goodness. And so that's the biggest part of the problem solving, right? Which is, the reason why companies hire us is to solve problems. So the problem that I solve at HP is, how can I get more money from customers for the offer that I build, right? All of us, that's what companies are looking for. So they're looking for you to solve problems. So as you go and look at an internship, Costa Rica, right? So it really, of course, we'll give them a learning experience, but the problem that they had to solve was, how do I get to Costa Rica? How do I find out where to live? And how do I make this all come together if that's really what I want to do? And it's only for 2 or 3 months, right? And so it's like, it's a safe zone to actually do it in. And I was pleasantly surprised at how they did it. And like I said, even the ones for Houston this year, I did Atlanta the last year, but I never hire them, maybe just one in the same city or wherever for the summer interns. And so they figured it out. And some of the employees at HP actually invited the students to live with them, since it was just for a short period of time. So that worked out, or they were able to live in the local dormitories. That was another way. So that's a part of problem solving. And I think for students who are really willing to do that, those are the ones that I look at and say, that's the kind of person I want to have on my team.
That leads excellently into the next question, kind of what do you look for when you're looking for job applicants, or in your case, interns? Like you said, definitely problem solving. What other skills or talents do you look for in people who apply to where you are?
And I'll continue, and then, so I look for, I just did an early career hire, so that's a person who has 5 years or less, and he just finished his master's, and I placed him in Houston. But I look for self-starters, because today companies are global. So gone are the days that you work on the floor and the supervisor is here, and so we all report into the same supervisor. That no longer happens. In fact, I just reported to just change managers. But the guy that I reported to before was in Grenoble, France. And so speaking French, and so we would do our little French lessons at the beginning of every conversation. But he was in France, so he's not there to supervise me. So even for these early career hires, right, so this gentleman works for me, he's in Houston, you have to be a self-starter. So you got to learn how to be very resourceful, figure it out, pull it together, know who to ask questions for, right, begin to network, and really pull it together. And then globalization, so to think globally, be open, be a self-starter, and then be innovative, because one, from a technology company, right, that's the reason why we like all this technology, is we're looking for innovators. We're not looking for status quo. So it's okay to bring something to the table that might be new and different and unheard of, and that's why we focus sometimes on the early career hires, so that we can get some new blood and some new thinking.
Go for it.
I like people that I've either come across before or who are referred to me by people that I know and trust. And so I guess what that would translate into in terms of advice or would be, and Adrian touched on this, it's good, any way that you can get visibility, internships or things like that, but also just building a network. Sometimes it's easy to think that you don't have anything to offer. Why would anyone take a meeting with you or talk to you? I mean, early in my career, and it's not really my nature to make small talk with people or to call people that I don't know and say, can you meet? But I forced myself to do it, and to this day, it's still paying off. I mean, people, when I go back to, I don't even know how many years ago, late 80s, early 90s, people that in the very first networking exercise that I did, where I thought of every person. So now there's 3 of us sitting up here. There's nothing stopping any of you from getting our email addresses and emailing us this week and saying, oh, something that you said was interesting, can you meet me for coffee? I mean, most people appreciate that someone actually wants to hear what they have to say or wants their advice. So don't be intimidated because you think, why would this person want to help me? I don't know them. But you'd be surprised. Most people, not everyone, you'll get some people who won't ever call you back or will not be very nice. But most people like that. Someone saying, oh, I care about what you have to say. Take every opportunity to do things like that, because then when I'm looking for someone, if I were in a traditional job and I want to hire somebody and I call around, someone, and this is true at all different stages of your career, someone's gonna say, oh, you know what, I just had coffee with somebody last week, I've never worked with them, but I was very impressed, or, you know, whatever it is, because I prefer, as many HR people will give you, no offense to anyone who's in HR in the room, but will give you all these fancy questions to ask, and companies do psychometric testing and all this stuff. I would rather have someone that I've come across and worked with even a little bit, or that someone I respect has worked with as a referral any day, to targeted selection or these fancy HR, you know, questions that they give you to ask people.
Questions?
I would love it if each of you would respond. What would you do differently if you knew now, how would you say?
Then
If
we
you
know
knew
now.
then what you know now, right? Like, what different choices would you make in some of your career moves with the wisdom that you have today?
Yeah, I would have started earlier around the networking, because for me, right, being an African-American female, most of the people that I work with don't look like me. And so therefore, I was like, it's funny because I actually had a shy approach, believe it or not, in which I would maybe stand off, or maybe not want to fully engage, or, you know, in after work activities, etc. And once I did, what I found is that I like the people and they liked me too, right? And so, and also to take advantage of the opportunity. So as we talk about being global, and I can still hear my mother saying, oh no, don't go that far away. Please, you know, just stay in the States so I can get to you. And many of our parents do that, right? They love us dearly, and they'll, you know, my mother would just say, please, just stay right here and we'll be fine. And I would have gone and taken on a global assignment earlier in my career. And I think I would have been much further advanced. So my son, this summer, my son was 13 this summer, he's now 14. He went to Europe for 3 weeks this summer. And so he went to Spain, Italy, and France. And while he was in Spain, he stayed with a family for part of the week. And so now this summer, the little boy is actually coming to stay at our house. And so while certainly as a parent, I'm like, I can't believe I'm letting him go, right? And I was, you know, as a parent, I was certainly, you know, a little cautious about it. But I want him to learn and have that experience sooner than later. And so now he's asking, you know, where is he going next summer? Or, you know, and so yeah, so I want him to think of being global as the norm. Whereas for me, it was just going to visit grandparents and other relatives and things like that. And that was just my culture. So.
That's a good inspiration, it really is.
Yeah, I always think that I should be more curious. I don't know if that's the correct word, but I have 3 years at CNN, and since last year, we work in the same building of CNN International, CNN Domestic, and CNN Español, where I am. And we work in the same space. It's a big, big building, and we can go wherever we're about. Yeah, we can cross doors and whatever. And when we go work, or when I go work, I was doing the same, you know, the same path. To go directly to my desk, sit there, and do my work. And I was saying, who are those people over there? And I was looking like that, like, oh, those are Americans, and we are Hispanic. So we're divided, but we're divided in our hearts, because it's the same thing, it's the same people. So I started looking a little bit more around. So I went through the buildings, and I said, oh, look at what they're eating. Oh, that's for me too. I can have it, because this is the company, this is for us. On how they work, how's the dynamic, how they're dealing with the news. And it was kind of the same thing, but different. Another language, another people. But now, when I go CNN, I go all the way through the international desk, and I go like, hey, and everybody thinks that I work in international, and I'm in Spanish, you know? And I think it's kind of that, to be curious about everything that surrounds us, and not be limited, because many of those limitations are in our mind.
So get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. It took some time, but I'm doing it.
And it sounds like with everyone's different personalities, sounds like Adrienne, you're more of an introvert, at least you were, or you can, you know, be
So
an
I was in the
extrovert.
beginning,
So-
until I developed a confidence level that said, you know,
Go do it.
yeah, right.
Yeah. And you immediately, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It sounds like you've got a curiosity, and that's what kind of led you to start networking more and that sort of thing.
And to learn more things.
So are there any type of, with that, are there any type of other traits or outside interests that helped you to kind of get that confidence and to get that curiosity outside, any outside interest or anything like that, that kind of help build that up? So you have the interest on the outside, but now you can bring it into the business world, and that's helping you.
Yeah, and it helps me a lot to learn about the dynamic of other teams, and not Hispanic teams, like international teams, how they work, how they do the news, how they write the news, how they talk to each other, how they interact. That's very important to us. And I'm gonna tell you, like Adrienne said, that sometimes we have a little issues because Latinos were, very kind of expressive, and we're very hugging people and kissing people. And then sometimes, we work in an American company. We work at CNN, it's an American company. So we have to deal with that, way of seeing life. So then we go and we have a friend or a coworker and we go, hey, how are you? How you doing? And it's 4 a.m. in the morning. And then our boss, which is from the United States, he keeps looking like, oh my God, this guy's all the time. And we say, oh, human resources. Let's, because they take us to human resources. So I think it's learning the cultural thing, it's learning about, I think, everything,
Isn't it your boss's responsibility to learn the culture he's supervising as well? I mean, you're not just a Hispanic person working in CNN, you're in CNN Espanol.
Yes.
So I'm listening to this scenario and it's like, yes, there's differences, but I think it's incumbent upon him that he has the responsibility to learn about his staff if you all share some common cultural aspects.
But you know what, they're learning, and it's kind of funny because just today, we always say a name to a guy that is our boss, and we say Mr. Breaking because he always do the breaking news. And he said, we have a breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. And he goes into the room like that. And everybody's going, oh, the breaking news, the breaking news. And we call him Mr. Breaking News. So then he was coming today, it was today. He was like this, and here comes Mr. Breaking News. And we say, woo! So he names himself. He realized that he's, so that's kind of being part of our culture too, because he was like that with serious and with that face like sad. And we were all like, oh. So I think is that.
Scott, what would you do differently now looking back on what you know today?
Yeah, I don't know. I always struggle with that kind of question only because I wouldn't really change anything, because one thing, whenever I think about that kind of thing, you think about the smallest thing that you might have done differently, the effect it would have had, and then you think, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. And so I wouldn't really want to change anything because, I guess there's a chance things could have turned out better, but I wouldn't want to risk that because it's all been okay, luckily. But no, you know what I mean? I think sometimes I do think if I were in that job now, I would like to do it over again, but then I might have stayed 3 more years at that company, and then I wouldn't be here now. So I guess it's the difference between saying you have regrets versus what you do. Anyway,
I was looking more for lessons learned.
Yeah. So, but it's a tough one for me to get. I guess the one thing I would say is, Adrienne and I were talking a little bit about this before we started, is maybe to be a little more aware of the less obvious things, politics of a situation. I'm a very, there's a business challenge, and we're all going to get together and we're going to address this this issue. This meeting is for this purpose. This is the challenge. We're all supposed to come together and figure out what we bring to this situation. But it's not that simple. There's a lot of other dynamics in the room. And this doesn't matter, whatever, the dynamics may be different if you're in this country or if you're in the UK or somewhere else. But it's never just, there's always a lot of other things going on. This person is an empire builder, and their biggest concern is going to be about getting the most work for their team, because then they want to say they need 3 more people in their team or a bigger budget. That kind of stuff goes on. And if you're the kind of person, like I am, who's really not focused on that kind of stuff, I think you just have to be aware of it. It can come back to bite you in certain ways, or, again, we were talking about this before. I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be a more political person myself. Those priorities would never be my priorities. But you have to be aware that other people are coming at it with different agendas, necessarily, that they may be different than you, even if they're not less pure than yours. There still might be different, and a lot of times I can be a little oblivious to that. So I guess if I could change something, I would maybe just try to remember that. To this day, it's hard for me to try to make those things, focus on those things as much as just focusing on whatever is, the project, if that makes any sense.
Any other questions?
Okay, my question is, how much is too much? Like, when you're going to other countries, how aware do you need to be about the cultures, just so as not to make the other person offended by your behaviors? Do you have any experiences that you could share with us?
How much is too much?
Can you give an example from your experience here, then that they could relate more to your question?
I don't know if I have any personal experience, but I feel like there are times that people try to be, like you talked about, speaking loudly and speaking slowly. How aware do you need to be to just be comfortable around other people, other cultures?
Yeah, what I found is, people are people. And once you really get to know them, they're accepting. So as I go into different countries, I'll ask a lot of questions, right? So, and they like that, because people like to talk about things that they know and about their country. And so I'll ask about the countries, etc. And I try to just be me. And they've been receptive. So I haven't had, someone be standoffish, etc. And I try to be as respectful as I can of their culture, knowing. And if I do something that is offensive, or I don't think I have yet, but I would hope that they would feel comfortable enough to share that with me. But they'll also help me, right? So they'll say, I'm trying to think of an example. They'll tell me how to do something. I think, Scott, you mentioned tipping or something like that. And they said, we don't tip in this country. And so for me, that was, surprising, right? And just different things like that. So they'll try to tell me in advance and give me cues and things like that. And so they're going to take me under their wing as I move along. So I haven't had a awkward moment, at least not for the most part. I'm
very aware Americans have a reputation in a lot of other parts of the world there are plenty of cultures. British people have a reputation for going places and getting drunk and rowdy and being loud, and there's truth to it. But I always try very hard to not be sort of the ugly American. Americans just have a reputation for wanting everything to be like it is here. My feeling always is, if you wanted it to be like home, then why didn't you stay home? You're going to other countries to experience what it's like in the other country. In some ways it's better, in some ways it's the same. It's all subjective anyway, but people expect the same. Most of the world things are just as good as they are here, but it might be a little different, So I don't know, I'm very conscious, even when it comes, so much more of the world now speaks English. It's really become where almost, and especially if you're in cities and there's tourism, but I still ask, do you speak English? Before I just barge in somewhere and start speaking in English or expect them to speak English, because I just feel it's presumptuous to go, but a lot of Americans just expect someone, what do you mean you don't speak English, you don't have a menu in English, you're a guest in their country. So I always try to be careful about not contributing to that stereotype. I don't know if that's helpful.
In the case of the news, we need to enforce or reinforce all the time the words that we said, because the meaning is different in different countries, and some of them are offensive or are not good to say. So then we have daily discussions about words that sounds like a little weird for somebody else, and say, do you say in your country this word? And I say, what is that word? I don't know what it is. Oh, it means this and this. No, we don't say it. Or wait, yes, we say it, but it means something wrong, so we don't use it. So we kind of have a manual, something little.
How many countries are represented in your newsroom?
How are they?
How many different countries?
I think like 20, like 20.
That's very close.
And we all are different. We're the same, but we're different.
No, I
And
understand
we speak, the other day we were talking about a line of cars, and somebody wrote a word, and the word was very, very bad in Argentina. And somebody took a picture of a banner that we put on the screen, and they say, how come CNN is dealing with that word? And we were like, oh, we didn't know, because in Venezuela it doesn't mean anything, in Colombia it doesn't mean anything, but in Argentina it was a really, really bad word.
Yeah.
So we have to, to learn from our coworkers. They're from there, and they can tell us. And it's like, that you're writing and you find that word, and you say, do you know that word? And maybe there's somebody from Colombia, somebody from Venezuela, Argentina, whatever place, Ecuador, and they say, it's like at a school. I don't know it. You know it? No, you know it? Okay, don't use that word. So I think that's important when you go to another country and you need to talk to people too, and to know what is offensive or what is not, because maybe in your language it's not, but in yours, in theirs, I mean, it is.
Yeah, as a part of my Latin America team, there's 44 countries that we support. And so most people don't know that there's that many countries in Latin America. And you're right, because they speak Portuguese, Spanish. And then it's funny because we also have contact centers that talk to our customers. So Portuguese, Spanish, English, and Spanglish is what they'll say.
Yeah, that's what we
so
use
yeah,
a lot.
so you're right. The language you just have to understand based on where you are at that point in time in Latin America.
Yes.
So yeah, so interesting.
Any other questions? And for our panel, what parting words of advice or words of wisdom would you like to leave with us?
I think it's passion for what you're doing. It's like everything in life. Have a passion to do things in your career that take you not just a little place, bigger places, other places, and get to know people. That's wonderful, and you're gonna feel very, very good and very, very nice. I think it's passion, and like if somebody's interested in the media, I think we don't have to be just in one type of mass media. We need to go everywhere. Magazines, is writing, and newspaper is going to the TV, is doing radio. There's a very, very nice and big thing that we can do in doing journalism.
One very practical thing that I thought of before when Adrian was talking about trying to go to other places before I forget is things like Airbnb, and there are a number of them, but Airbnb is the one that I've used and comes to mind. is a very good way if you want to go inexpensively to Airbnb. There are places listed in the biggest cities and the smallest places in a whole lot of countries. And it's a remarkably inexpensive way to stay somewhere, but a lot of times the place that you stay, you can get a room in somebody else's house if that's what you want. But even if you want sort of your own space, a lot of times it will be a guest house on someone's property, and so they'll have a home, but then they might have a little cottage right on the property. And almost everyone who puts places to rent on Airbnb, even some of them are, there are a lot of people from the UK who have moved around and started doing that, but if not, even if they're local, they tend to speak English because a lot of their customers are going to be English. But most of the time, you not only get a great place to stay, whether it's in a big city or a small town somewhere, at a good price, but it's all, the role of the person who rents to you a lot of times, it's not like a hotel where you're bothering them every time. They really like to kind of share the local culture with you, and you can really nurture a friendship if you want to, not every time, but anyway, that could be a really good way because you get to know a local family, or, I mean, there's ways as students, I think you can find people who are accepting students to come and stay in their home. I know people do that, but anyway, Airbnb and those kinds of things is a good way to travel for not a lot of money and have someone take you sort of under their wing potentially locally. The only other thing I would say in terms of words of wisdom, whatever, is trying not to get impatient with yourself and your situation. If you're, sometimes things don't go at the pace you would like them to go. And I remember early in my career, there were people that I worked with who all of a sudden were sort of ahead of me. And I would think, well, I think I have as much talent or energy or ambition as that person, and in some cases more, so I thought. Why do they have that job and are making more money? What have I done wrong? And a couple of years later, I got a break, and then someone was probably thinking that about me. I mean, things just happen. It's kind of the same thing, if you're single and you want to be in a relationship, it's sort of chill out. You learn that when you get older, that, it's sort of, things happen when they're meant to happen. And, I would just say that it tends to even out, and don't get impatient or frustrated and feel like you have to hit the panic button and do anything or question your own abilities, or because it's circumstantial most of the time. That's not to say that there might not be. You might not ask yourself, is there something I could do? Should I network a little more or whatever? But a lot of times it really is just, it's not your time yet. So don't focus so much on, well, this one got ahead or that one's married and I'm still, whatever it is. Just chill out and try to be a little more patient. Keep working hard and, be acting with integrity and doing what you're doing, and more likely than not, it's just a function of timing.
Well, you all are great examples of people that have walked the walk, and we thank you for sharing your insights. We would love it if you would linger and let our guests come and talk with you individually. But in the meantime, we very much wanted to say thank you for participating tonight. We have other goodies for you guys. And also, for those of you that are guests that are not part of our cohort, we have goodies for you also. There's some KSU t-shirts and paraphernalia that we want to invite you to help yourself to. Yes, you guys. So thank you. So everybody please stay and enjoy some refreshments. And maybe if you have individual questions, our guests will receive you. But you guys were terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Dr. Mayo, we have a goodie for you too. Thank you so much.
Facilitating
all this.
I know, it's awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm
Great.
Hi, Raisa. Nice to meet you too.
I have a wonderful what you said about patience, either we want to be easier, so I can do that.
alcohol, alcoholic ones, but
You know what? I have.
It's frustrating sometimes, especially when you're younger. A year feels like an eternity, and then you look back and you kind of think, a year goes by very fast. It just feels like such a long time, but I don't actually have cards. But I can write down and just give you my email.
Celia, she was telling me she just texted me that she got recommended on
Yeah.
She got a good one. Is she okay?
Yeah, well, I just remember my name.
By all means, yeah, absolutely. I'll let the other.
Yeah, but as we start to look for interns, you guys get to know what
But I'm glad that we got a chance to really see how to organize. Well, not organize it, but some things what we should do for all.
Yeah, I know we started around November 9th. Haven't started any of that yet. You probably
Is she on your call? Oh. She wasn't the night we did our presentation. I have to say, because I didn't even listen.
Need to bring it to it, so she missed it when we had questions for her. So it might have been like someone new.
That I can get the feedback to, like,
She just had a good idea, which is I'm on LinkedIn, so I can just jot down my name, just connect with me on LinkedIn.
sometimes I'm doing meditation and like 3 minutes. And
I just missed what he said.
because it's not just writing, it's no longer looking at the images. There's no searching for the images, and so many images are prohibited, and we can't air it, but I can see it. So sometimes stuff that is that's terrible, because it turns you, your day is bad, the rest of the day is bad.
I don't want to, you see what I'm saying? So
But we try to,
yeah,
go
so
there.
by all means, send me an email, call.
But I don't know, with passion and with love.
Hi, how are you? Okay, great. Hi, Jillian. Nice meeting you.
Yeah. And you know what? I have time to
I'm gonna get them sent again. I have
I mean,
the information is still the same, with the exception of the title. I'm in a different organization.
It's all the time, and you're seeing and you're looking and you're whatever. I go to work, at 4 a.m. in the morning. So I have to wake up today or to work at 3 a.m. Okay, but the moment when you wake up is the most shocking. You want to be sleeping. But when I get there, it's like a big city. It's like just screens, and lights and everything.
And it's interesting, yeah, so I didn't, so it's funny, that question didn't come up. Yeah, some countries, right, being an African American, like, teaching to carry bags. So they kind of say that, but the dynamics, one point, I talked about that in an awkward situation was, I was there, some white counterparts and some white customers, and by the way, I know let me stop it. Okay. So, but